There we go. Welcome this evening to our ASQ Innovation Division Technical Community, where we are discussing with our phenomenal presenter tonight, Miss Ciara Ungar, a business case for cultivating purpose. You see that Ciara Ungar is a phenomenal leadership business coach and consultant, an award winner, an international speaker, a mentor and advisor, and sits on the Forbes Coaches Council and Board of Tech Shift Alliance. She is the founder and CEO of two companies. She has a blended background that really does justice to everything about culture, entrepreneurship, business, and most of all, cultivating purpose. He has over 17 years of expertise with Fortune 500 companies, angel VC investors, and she is a disciple of Start with Why. You are in for a treat tonight because her purpose is to guide others through transformative thinking and really help you shift how you're going about cultivating purpose to enhance your organizations and businesses. So a fun fact is our own Miss Ciara Ungar has cheered in the 2006 Pro Bowl, and she was an author at the tender age of age 6. Although she says she never published that book, she's a phenomenal writer and author. So without further ado, let's welcome Miss Ciara Ungar for a wonderful session tonight on a business case for cultivating purpose. Without further ado, I am passing control over to Ciara.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rhonda. It looks like I still need those permissions. There we go. Yes, thank you so much. And I love that you used both of those. For those who don't know, I gave her a professional option and a fun option. I love that you used both. I did, in fact, cheer at the 2006 Pro Bowl. That was a really fun experience, and did, in fact, write my first book at age 6. Knew at a very young age I wanted to write, and it has just grown from there. You will never see that work published, thankfully, but maybe someday I'll revisit it and make it into something great. But Rhonda, thank you so much for that introduction. It's always lovely to see you, and it feels so good to be back here with the ASQ crew for another amazing event, and this time speaking on a business case for cultivating purpose. As Rhonda highlighted, I absolutely love what I get to do. I get to meet, and I say get because I love it, I get to meet and work with amazing business leaders. That's everything from founders of businesses and leaders within businesses already existing, everywhere from 3 years in to 15 years in and even longer. So, I love that I get to work with them and strategically work with them through their toughest milestones. I have been working with brands for 17 years, as Rhonda mentioned, wearing hats across pitching, funding, strategic planning, and marketing. And what I've learned is that no matter how much we strategize, there is a fundamental truth that we can't get away from. You see, I am very conflicted when I work with business leaders. Businesses contract me for funding, for growth strategy, strategic planning, because that's what most leaders of businesses want answers to. But with the vast amount of business models and proven strategies available, in theory, there really should be no demand for the type of consultation work that I do. The supposed answers really are already out there. Those answers that we're constantly seeking, they're already out there in the open, right? You can go to Google, they're already out there. Fact of the matter is, there is a demand for my work. Anyone can go on YouTube, attend a workshop, learn frameworks like this, or absorb articles as part of their morning routine or their growth toolkit. Yet here I am with you today, and I like to think of it in this way, because with all that content available out there, the question is, why do we still struggle to have the answers and the growth that we're looking for? There are a ton of strategies and methods available to us, but for some reason, they don't drive the results that we need, right? So there is a demand for my work. And even though there really shouldn't be, there is. And further, I would actually say there's an opportunity to consider what's falling short if we think about it that way. What leaders across the board are doing isn't working. If it was, we wouldn't be here having this discussion. And the reason is we are using the same strategies that we've used for 60 plus years in a context that no longer works. We see that businesses aren't growing, or perhaps that there are bottlenecks or inefficiencies that you just can't seem to diagnose and fix, right? And that's a lot of what you'll hear about from my colleagues in the industry. Even I talk about that too. You know, strategies, techniques, processes that allow you to create that sustained growth. But if I take a step back, I'd say that there's a need to do things different. There's an opportunity to standardize a better approach and bring that into our organization and to our teams. And a more impactful approach, I would say, a more sustainable approach. You know, you're in this virtual room because you are looking to learn a new way of approaching that growth as a business or as a business leader, a way that actually works, right? Because we know it's possible. We know it's possible to have great success. We see some companies do really well. So what's their secret? What are they doing that's working that we can emulate? And so I want to ask you, how do you explain why some companies and teams succeed while others fail? When we all have access to the same knowledge and the same consultants and the same talent and the same media and strategies, what makes successful companies and successful leaders different? Okay, if you Google this question, traits of the most successful companies, you'll get answers like what you see here on the screen. People, culture, technology, budget, marketing, vision, management, being customer centric, right? But if those are the answers and the answers alone, why are we still struggling? Right? It's thought provoking. And the answer is because there's more to it. There's more to us as humans, and that's purpose. Now, purpose may sound like it has no place in the business world, in the office, but businesses who cultivate purpose grow faster, they get higher valuations, and they outperform in the stock market. And that's because employees are more motivated, they're more productive, they're more engaged, and they're more passionate about the work that they do. And there's a book, it's one of my favorite books. There's a book called Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David. And in this book, Bet-David talks about how too many people want to make their number 5 move without going through the first 4 moves. And I see this all the time. Leaders hire me, they want me to give them a blueprint of what works as a quick fix. And the reality is that nothing matters unless you understand what makes you tick and who you want to be. And he says in his book, Bet-David, that clarity comes from making decisions that are aligned with your core beliefs and values. Compensation packages can only go so far. I feel like each year we get a new compensation package option. We're constantly trying to figure out what that compensation package should be, but they can only go so far. When you touch people's hearts, they will move mountains for you. And to do this, you have to take the time to understand them and get to know their deepest fears, their deepest beliefs, and their deepest desires. So when I'm contracted to develop a pitch or a funding strategy or a business plan or an employee engagement plan, I always take a step back. And, I'm being asked to complete move number 5 before moves 1 through 4 are even thought of. So I take a step back and I ask business leaders I work with, what's your why? And I hear things like, we deliver better communication and better automation. We create networking opportunities. We have faster connectivity speeds. Now, let me ask you, does that ignite your fire? When you look at the words on the screen here, does that motivate you? Do you feel anything when you hear those words? Does that make you get out of bed in the morning, is what I'm asking. These words on the screen, that's not purpose. Those are value propositions, right? Purpose is central to human psychology. We know this because there are entire fields of research completely dedicated to proving how central purpose is to our well-being as humans. And yet, we have simultaneously decided as a society that it has no place within the four walls of our workplace where we spend the majority of our waking hours, right? But it is. Purpose is so central to our careers, whether we want to believe it or not. It's central to our success as a business and our effectiveness as leaders. It's our human nature, and we can't run from it. I wish we could, but we can't. Trust me, I've tried. Several years ago, I was faced with a life-changing disease, and it made me realize how wrong I really had it as a leader on my team. When I went through that experience, I saw perfection, skills, and those types of attributes meant nothing if there wasn't more to what we were doing. I won awards. I led skilled teams. I was very proud of that. I worked for big brands, but none of it mattered to who I was at my core. Okay. It was an empty effort. It was hard work, all done in vain. And despite my best efforts, despite those accolades and wonderful achievements, every role that I held felt empty. It felt at odds with who I was and what my purpose was. That disease that I was working through, that time in my life, forced me to reconcile that disconnect. Didn't have a choice anymore. And when I gave into the gravity of it, when I started building businesses and teams and a self that walked in purpose, everything started to flow more naturally. Okay. I experienced exponential growth. I was more motivated, less stressed. My teams and network were even stronger. Growth happened, productivity happened, success happened just by changing the dial a slight bit, just a bit. And that is why I'm passionate about cultivating purpose as business leaders. I've seen the magic that it can create. The success of any organization depends on its leaders' ability to motivate and move groups toward achieving goals. But to truly motivate and be effective, you need purpose. Now, I'll say this feels a bit fluffy and uncomfortable. And if that's how you feel, you're right on track, because we've been programmed to believe that the emotional side of us and how we feel has no place in the workplace, right? Feel relatable? And certainly the idea of purpose isn't really discussed in the workplace. You know, we talk about mission statements and the purpose-driven companies, but what the heck does that even mean? What does that actually mean? And further, is that really the same thing as understanding our own individual purpose as humans? Okay. I want to ask you guys a question. Think of someone who you feel is a great leader. I'll give you a second. Think of someone you feel is a great leader. Maybe you know them personally, or you look up to them from a distance. You've never met them in person, but you know of them. How do they make you feel? I think I saw something come through the chat here. Inspired. How do they make you feel? What character traits do they have? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Engaged, yeah. Exactly. Now, the reason I ask you this, empowered, 100%. The reason I ask you this is because business is changing. The world is changing. Our culture is changing. The economy is changing. And so too are those expectations and the opportunities that come with it. Okay, you just told me what you think of when you think of leaders who've impacted you. You know what I didn't see come through the chat? Sales numbers, awards, revenue targets, right? So cultivating purpose gives you, your business, and your team a chance to create meaning, satisfaction, energy, and performance so that you can achieve your goals. Your bottom line doesn't start with numbers. It starts with purpose-driven people. Let me say that another way. Your best chance at success has less to do with focusing on numbers and more to do with focusing on purpose, meaning, and connection. And with such high stakes, it would probably benefit us to pause and reflect on what purpose even means. Okay, because purpose is more than a statement, in my opinion. It's more than a passion. It's not a value proposition, and it's certainly not a mission statement. Okay, at its most basic definition, purpose is the reason for which something exists, is done, made, or used. Very basic definition. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't feel exciting personally. It feels pretty flat when I read that definition. It's pretty mundane, right? I don't feel anything except reinforce that my purpose is my reason for being. But I don't feel the fire and inspiration from this definition. And that's because inspiration can't simply appear out of nowhere. That fire doesn't just simply appear out of nowhere. It's not a blueprint, okay? We have to understand our purpose in order to really pull from it and feel anything around it. We have to understand it. We have to cultivate that purpose. So starting with understanding our personal purpose and then applying that outwardly to the business ventures that we build and the teams that we lead, that's what this is about. Now, your personal purpose, I think it's important to separate. Your personal purpose is what will define your actions and the opportunities that you pursue. It influences how you interact with your teams and how you navigate decision making. Your business purpose, okay, or your organization's purpose is what will define how you create your teams, your processes, and your offerings. Definition aside, I'm happy to report that cultivating your purpose is all about developing it throughout your life, throughout your career, and as your business and team continue to grow. It's not static, it's not finite, it expands as you expand. So if you don't have this yet defined, that's okay. Whether it's for yourself or for your business, that's okay. You may have a hunch right now, and that's great. That's a great start. So if you have a hunch what your skills are, what you care about, or maybe you have a sense of what you're good at or what interests you, or in the case of your business, what your business offers, maybe you have a good sense of it. Okay, but cultivating purpose is an intentional step. It's an intentional deep dive across 3 areas spanning you as a person to the organization itself, and it's a continual process of development and growth. So this evening, I'm leaning into cultivating purpose and how you can do that as leaders within your organization, and I invite you to come on this journey with me. It's a fun ride. Now, there are before we get into it, there are a lot of frameworks for cultivating purpose out there, all of which are great. I support them all. For my purposes today, I am going to adapt a framework provided from Net Impact that it's usually talked about within the context of social entrepreneurship and social impact. And I'm pulling that into our context for today and what we do. And so I'm going to talk through these 3 areas, but provide very specific and actionable thinking around how to do this, leveraging my own frameworks. So kind of frameworks within frameworks, if you will. So just to kind of high level talk through these, and then we'll deep dive. As a business leader, you will cultivate purpose through your behavior, through the culture you create, and through the accountability that you put in place. So in other words, how you behave within your organization and the integrity between kind of walking that talk of what you value, what you believe, and what you do spans your own personal behavior, how you treat others, and how you lead your teams and curate that vision. The culture itself cultivates purpose in a way that your people interact through processes, policies, and really, support creating that psychological safety around differences of thought, innovation, and really uphold your mission with a respectful environment. And the mechanisms that you put in place to keep you accountable to your vision of creating that value internally and not necessarily focusing on profit can also cultivate that purpose. Okay, and all of these areas work together to create a purpose that people can align to and work toward. So let's take a look at these three together. We're going to deep dive on each of them. It's going to be a fun ride. So starting with behavior. Now, again, behavior is all about how you behave within the organization, right? It's how you walk your talk. It's the actions that you take. And the reality is, for most of us today, is when we think about the workplace and what we experience within the workplace, our teams, our organizations, they're filled with behaviors that are inauthentic, right? We can feel when people are being disingenuous. And I'll pause on that because I'd like to ask what comes to mind when you can feel that someone is not being authentic with you. So share that in the chat with me. How does that make you feel? How do you feel towards someone who you can tell is being inauthentic? Share that in the chat with me. I'm curious. How does it make you feel when you can sense that someone's being inauthentic in the workplace? Give you guys just a second here. Disappointed. Oof, that cuts deep for me. Really off-putting, totally turned off. Yeah. Okay. You know what I'm not seeing here? What about trust? Yeah, we don't trust them, right? Yeah, exactly. Inauthenticity breeds broken trust. And I have a whole book on trust, so I could talk all day about this and how it impacts the workplace, but I'll move on from that for now. But absolutely, trust is at the heart of that. And we'll get back to trust here in a moment. Inconsistent. So behavior today, more often than not, is not consistent, right? Someone acts one way toward someone and a different way toward someone else, or perhaps different toward that same person, but different depending on the context. It sounds exhausting just listening to it. Unproductive. A lot of behavior is unproductive. So gossip, complaints, poor work ethic, closed-mindedness, all those types of activities lead to unproductive behaviors. Okay, toxic. Ooh, toxic behavior is absolutely present in most work environments. Toxic leaders and toxic teams, team members alike, everyone on the team are really bred from things like gossip, selfish attitudes, pessimism, arrogance, you name it. That's just to name a few. Ineffective, absolutely ineffective behavior, I would say, is a cousin of unproductive behavior. So maybe action is being taken, but it's empty. It's not creating forward momentum, and it's holding you back, right? Worst of all these habits, worst of all, is we accept these things as just the way it is, navigating office politics, right? I'm not lying about that. I know that we all relate to that. And this is a big problem. It's a problem because these are damaging behaviors that we've let go unchecked, and they're behaviors that affect our bottom line. We have tons of studies out there, but I chose to show you guys one from Harvard Business School. This study that they highlighted here reported that 80% of employees lost work time worrying about someone else who has offended them. 78% said their commitment to the organization declined in the face of toxic behavior. 66% said their performance declined, and 63% lost work time because they were trying to avoid the situation. So behavior is highly impactful for our business. More importantly, cultivating positive behavior can be the difference in your success, and it requires aligning around purpose. So what is that behavior and how do we cultivate it? Now, I deliver a whole workshop series that really unpacks this very topic. So we're just going to scratch the surface today. In this series, this workshop that I give, I describe behaviors, so positive behaviors more specifically, as trust, empathy, and transparency. Trust, as you know, is built over time, and it's through actions, personality, and characteristics as they are presented over time. And with trust, we see characteristics like consistency, where we're looking at how well you walk your talk and do what you say you're going to do. So, what type of role model you are, how consistent your actions are with words, your follow through and effort. Okay, we're looking at reliability of your judgment, of your integrity, and of your support. And we're looking at how you manage relationships. And that's all about balancing the results that you're looking for as a leader with that care and concern for others. And one of my favorite quotes that demonstrates the importance of trust when it comes to leadership is here on the screen. The bond is created that provides the leader with the vehicle for success. Trust is the glue which binds the leader to their followers and provides the capacity for organizational and leadership success. And you see, I wholeheartedly, with every fiber of my being, believe that we cannot successfully communicate or make decisions or any of these other daily tasks that we do as leaders. We cannot successfully do any of those without a foundation of trust. It is the vehicle through which we can be successful at what we need to be successful at as leaders. Now, again, I want to hear from you in the chat. Keep those fingers hot. Think of a time when you had a manager or a leader that you worked with who you felt you could trust. How did you feel going into each day? How did you feel going into discussions with them? Type it in the chat there. Think of a manager you felt you could trust. How did that make you feel each day? How did it make you feel to go into discussions with them? Absolutely empowered to speak up, 100%. Safe, absolutely. And I've given this training many times, and I always ask this question. And some of the most common responses I get are things like, I feel more included, more motivated, less anxious. I feel like I can make mistakes, right? And this could be some of the things you're feeling as well. Safe, empowered to speak up, absolutely fit within that. And you know, trust is fundamental to creating a safe space emotionally at work. We saw that in the chat. And that very fact has a profound impact on your team's creativity, right? Science backs this up. I wish I was making it up, but science backs it up. When we feel safe, the part of our brain that is creative is allowed to do its thing. Okay, we feel anxious. When we feel anxious or fearful, the creative part of our brain literally shuts off because we go into protection mode. So when you create a space that your team can trust and they can trust you in, you actually create more effective teams. And a key aspect to remember when it comes to trust is the fact that it's a two-way street. I talk about this in my book extensively. There's literally a whole chapter on trust. And I also go through trust building exercises when I do this full training workshop. But trust is both a give and take. So not only can you be consistent, reliable, and create bonded and balanced relationships that build that foundation of receiving trust, but the other part of it is giving trust as a leader. So trust is a give and take. Okay, how many of you have ever been micromanaged? Ooh, type yes in the chat if you've ever been micromanaged. Think about how this made you feel. Okay, usually the response to that question is somewhere in the realm of you didn't feel trusted. You didn't feel like your manager thought you were capable or smart enough of doing what needs to be done. And so giving trust to our teams is just as important to a strong foundation as demonstrating trust. And I know that this can be particularly difficult for two types of leaders. One, those high in expertise, you've been doing it a long time or you're highly trained, or those those in smaller organizations, startups. And in both cases, we fall into this trap of being needed for our expertise and having to mentor others. It feels great at times, but it's also a trap. So if you're a leader who often finds themselves feeling frustrated or obligated to kind of do this work yourself, I want to chat with you after the session. Let's connect, because we think we have to be that, but more often than not, we don't. I've worked with several leaders actually who have struggled to take a step back and give a little trust. And what we do is go through a series of exercises to really understand those trust gaps and outlining that path toward closing those gaps. We mark out milestones to hold each party accountable for kind of getting to a place where this, as a leader, you no longer feel the need to have that control. But it takes intentionally showing up and knowing how you get there if you want to see that growth happen. Okay. Moving on, transparency. It's our second positive behavior as leaders. And that's all about leading with openness and honesty. Okay. All of the activities you do as transparent behavior points to vulnerability or honesty. And you're sharing information freely when you're doing this. You're inviting open communication. You're being truthful about your position. All of that is filtered within transparency. And as leaders, what I often see is that we want to keep a lot of information sacred. We want to keep it close to our hearts. Lots of reasons for that. It could be to keep us positioned as the expert, maintain the sense of being needed, or it could be because you want to avoid creating chaos on your team until you have all the facts. There's an unlimited number of reasons why we sometimes lose sight of the importance of transparency. But the reality is, people have grown tired of surprises. And they've grown tired of being in an environment where they're just expected to act on whatever new information management tells them. Okay, people want to exist in an environment where they work with leaders who allow them to have greater clarity of thought by eliminating the unknowns that creep into our minds with every decision we make and the relationships we create. Okay, workplace surveys always point to security and career advancement opportunities as important to employees, and they are. But do you know what consistently makes the top of the list? Spoiler alert, it's transparency. Employees want to be part of a culture that places high value on delivering truth. And they want leaders who are proactive in sharing where the company is headed and what decisions are in discussion. They want transparency so they can understand how everything that's happening is going to impact their own lives and satisfaction. And that's totally fair. And I understand we can't just share everything, the minute it comes to us. I actually got a very poor manager one time who was very careless and always just pretty flippantly shared information and actually created a lot of chaos. So you do have to create balance. You have to be careful. But I think transparency is important, but there's an art to it, and you can sharpen that as a skill. Okay, couple of tips here. Communicate less over email and Slack, and intentionally carve out time to more personally engage face-to-face and establish that loyalty and that bond and that positive attitude, because that can ripple throughout each circumstance and throughout the teams. Another tip, be authentic, create that authentic connection. That's created through transparency. And when we bring people along for the ride in decision making, that contributes to that authentic connection and that transparency. So just a couple of tips there, but again, I give a whole training on this. So moving into our last area here of behaviors, we have empathy. This is one of the largest topics. I'm going to go very quick through it. It's a big topic in the leadership space right now. There's entire books out there, entire courses on empathy-based leadership. Lots of focus on it because it's important. And that's the position I come from too. Again, I have a whole chapter on it in my book. So I 100% believe in empathy-based leadership. And I would say it should be discussed as the first step, or that foundational step of leadership growth. And that's why I believe in this framework that I deliver that workshop on. And that framework is around understanding 3 key layers of leadership. And I think that's so important because we can see where empathy falls within this larger picture of our behaviors and those skills that we're looking to sharpen. And when we see that, when we understand that, we can really create a foundation that actually can help us succeed. Without looking at our attributes, or this inner core, I call it, of who we are and what drives us, Without understanding our roots, we cannot possibly be empathetic leaders. We can try, but, and we can take steps and we can practice, we can ask questions, but it won't show up for us when we need it to most. So I think it's important. Let's talk about what empathy is and what it is not. Empathy is not sympathy. It doesn't mean that you simply feel pity for someone or compassion for someone. It's a common misconception that that's the case, and a damaging one at that, because when we feel compassion and pity, we're positioning ourselves in a place of power. We are looking through our own lens or how we think we would feel. Empathy is also not liking, meaning you don't have to necessarily agree with someone. You can have empathy while still completely coming from a different position on a matter. So it's not agreement, but what it is goes beyond demonstrating care for your team members. Empathy is, it goes well beyond that. It's carrying yourself as a leader. It requires genuine connection and care. That's behavior, right? It's the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. Okay. Notice the key foundation of empathy is not processing how you would feel, sad, angry. It's about understanding someone else's frame of reference. And it takes time and practice to build up this muscle. It's an emotional and thinking muscle that becomes stronger with use. Okay. Empathy is a skill in a lot of ways, but before it can become a skill, it has to become a way of life and carrying yourself. Okay. That's that behavior piece. Doesn't just happen. Okay. Trust, transparency, and empathy. These positive behaviors that cultivate purpose don't just happen automatically. Just like empathy itself doesn't happen automatically. This workshop I've talked about has these 3 layers. I call it the ABS framework, affectionately, ABS. And that stands for rebuilding your attributes, behaviors, and skills. It's all about inward, outward transformation. So that by the time we get to skills, we're good to go. We have that strong foundation. Okay, your attributes are all about that inner purpose, your heart, managing your emotions, checking your ethics, understanding your beliefs, and your values, and your biases and motivators. And those then translate into your behaviors that we can refine into skills. And oftentimes we jump right into the skills, right? It's move number 5, but we haven't addressed moves 1 through 4, right? If we have these biases, it's going to impact our communication. If we have these beliefs or we don't have purpose, it's going to impact how well we can carry out these skills. All of these are intertwined. And I talk a lot about this in my book, but all of these are intertwined and we have to do the hard work of rebuilding that core. Now, the second area we can cultivate purpose in within our organization is culture. And remember, culture has to do with our policies and our practices that reinforce that vision and are consistent with the mission that allows us to create that psychological safety. Now, I'm going to take a second with you. This is a lovely picture, by the way. Take a breath. Just breathe with me. I want you to think for a moment. Think about a song that you've heard, or hearing a child laugh, or a quote that you've read, or watching a sunrise. Maybe you're looking out on the ocean. Think about something that has given you a tingle down your spine because you felt yourself connect more deeply to yourself and the world in that moment. I have goosies. I don't know about you. But I ask you to reflect on this because these are the experiences that remind us of what's real and what's important. These are moments, emotions, and feelings that cut through noise. And when we talk about purpose, we're talking about recognizing a feeling or a sense that there is something greater than ourselves. And cultivating purpose in the workplace and in the workplace culture can achieve the same thing. Okay, imagine arriving at work each day, virtually or in the physical space, and being clear about your direction within that company. Okay, you're in the right place. You just feel it in your bones. Having a sense, a heartfelt sense, like what we just felt, of ownership for the company's purpose. knowing that what you are doing in your role is making an impact within the organization and outside of the organization. And most importantly, feeling there's a safe space for you to innovate, ask questions, and engage deeply without having to worry about office politics. Doesn't that sound nice? Sounds really nice. Imagine being in a company culture where you feel like you belong. Okay. And I don't mean like you've made it across the threshold and have been accepted into the in crowd, but a place where you feel like all of who you are belongs and is embraced. You don't have to earn your way into the insiders club. And instead, you're welcomed and embraced for what you bring to the table and who you are at your core. And if you're thinking to yourself, that's not that important to you, or your teams, your organization, I would encourage you to think again, my friend, because belonging and connection are primal to human beings. There is a lot of research out there that proves a sense of belonging and connection have a profound impact on stress, behavioral issues, feeling supported, building resilience, effectiveness. Okay, now this whole area, this whole section I'm talking through on culture isn't about belonging, but we can't understand the notion of building culture if we don't understand the idea of belonging. Because what happens when it comes to culture is we think we have a company culture and that culture creates exclusivity, right? Culture becomes a we versus them conversation. Cliques are formed, or we evaluate the performance of people based on how well they fit that culture. We hire based on culture. We fire based on culture. We measure progress based on culture, and you either belong or you don't. And what's worse is, again, we've accepted that as the way it is, even though we have all been hurt by it. Or we've made ourselves sick striving for it, literally. and we live in daily fear even of not being a part of it. And what has happened is, because of that, we've created a really big problem within company cultures that has created a disconnect between us and the purpose of the company, or between us and our own personal purpose. Okay, there is distrust. We try to analyze someone else's next move, living in constant survival mode. And that's our human instinct. Okay. A culture where there is no emotional safety and belonging has been created. We've accepted that. And when there's this lack of emotional and psychological safety, remember, research shows that that hinders our productivity and our creativity. And when we feel we need to be in constant survival mode like this to fend for ourselves, this fight or flight mode of our brain kicks in and literally shuts down the creative side of our brains in order to protect us. And if you haven't connected the dots yet, you can draw a direct line to your bottom line with that, right? But we can do better. I believe we can do better. That's the good news. We can create a culture of connection and purpose. Business cannot be purpose driven if it doesn't demonstrate purpose through its culture. And there's a scenario in which we can actually achieve that. A purpose-driven culture is people-focused, not number-focused. Okay, it's a culture where people feel respected and appreciated in their own love language, if you will. There's alignment between leadership, the people, the strategy. Trust exists because it's valued and built from the top down. Every touch point, email, Slack, interaction reverberates the same message. Everyone embodies the company purpose, which makes things easier and less energy and time consuming, right? There's a North Star that everyone feels connected to and motivated to work toward. There's a heartfelt sense of ownership that we all feel. We get the tingles, okay? All of which really helps to create more effective teams and create more effectiveness in general, because the company's purpose fits. It fits with who we are and fits alongside any single individual's purpose. And that's what I help leaders do. Creating a culture of purpose is not a questionnaire you fill out and get immediate answers. It's not a strategy document that you create. It's nothing someone can tell you how to do. It's a process of cultivation and discovery. It's peeling back the onions and creating deep-rooted essence and guide that shapes everything that we do. Okay, hey, we're here today, so there are some steps you can take that are starters. Always ask first. Seek to understand, always be curious, and that's everything small to big. Cultivate your self-awareness as a leader so you can be attuned to the culture and how others are engaging with it. And of most importance, I would say, is define your why. You can't lead your team, your organization with purpose if you don't know your own. And what I think this points back to, again, is focusing on people, right? Not numbers. Healthy cultures define success as making a contribution and reward people for having others' backs. I'll read that again. Healthy cultures define success as making a contribution and reward people for having others' backs, not rewarding people who treat others terrible and create distrust. That David talks about this too in his book when he talked about whether or not to keep a high-performing sales agent who wasn't upholding the company values, but hey, he drove those numbers, he brought in the sales. So do we keep him or do we not? Right? It's a tough question. The last area we'll talk about as part of cultivating purpose is accountability, because none of what we've covered today is possible if we're not keeping ourselves accountable to it. And keeping ourselves accountable to positive behavior and creating a connected and purpose-driven culture is what we're all about today, right? And with accountability, we are talking about the people, structures, metrics that ensure that we are following through on our vision, this purpose that we've aligned to, right? So I got to ask you, if you were to ask every employee at your company what the purpose of the business is, do you believe that their answers would match? And further, would every level of the workplace, so every person in the hierarchy, say the same from C-suite to entry level? Would they have the same answer about what your purpose is? In many cases, if you were to conduct that type of survey across the organization, people will have different answers. And yet, we often think that we are showing up each day with the same vision and the same North Star that we're all working toward. Got to get those sales, right? And what ends up happening is that if we aren't checking in and we have no metrics that we are using to understand where we stand and how well we're progressing toward our goals and our mission, then our assumptions can get the best of us. And those assumptions can be very off base, which leads to missed targets, missed goals, and over time creates a disconnect between teams and purpose of the organization. Okay, which, as we've heard today, creates a loss of motivation, decline in performance, decline in attendance. All of these things are connected. The impact on our bottom line will be a slow burn, okay, until it's so bad that you have a real problem that's going to be really hard to fix. So how can we get ahead of that problem is the question. And that's of course what I work with leaders to do. So if you're thinking about people, starts with you as a leader, your people, right? So you can lead by example and keep yourself accountable, and not just out in the open, but behind closed doors, which is even harder. Okay. More often than not, that requires that we take the time to reprogram our abs, our ABS, right? Our core. And remember that framework I mentioned? Reprogram that core. Understand your own purpose and the biases and the drivers that you have so you can cultivate that around you with alignment. Take the time to check in daily with your team. Create daily FaceTime opportunities so you can stay connected to the people, the humans. And that means focusing on the people first, not the numbers, right? The numbers will follow if you're focused on understanding the people. And lastly, assign people to be responsible for helping push forward certain ethics and goals. You can't be everything to everyone as a leader, so enlist the help of the team. Bring them into cultivating purpose and creating that mission. Also consider the structures that you're building that can keep you accountable to your purpose. Create codes of conduct or those codes of ethics that every interaction and decision is run through. If an action doesn't align to this code that you've outlined, it gets booted. Okay. And similarly, create frameworks that your people or your organization across the organization and the organization itself can adopt that are aligned to supporting that purpose that you've defined. Again, run every decision through this. If someone or something isn't aligned to that framework, then, and it's not going to keep you accountable to your purpose, it gets booted. Okay. Instituting two-way feedback is also key to keeping your organization accountable to its purpose. And I'm not talking about HR suggestion boxes, which I think we all have. I'm talking about people-to-people two-way feedback opportunities that create connection and conversations. You can really unpack the root of the challenges that your organization is facing. And lastly here, we wouldn't be in business if we didn't talk numbers and didn't talk metrics a little bit, right? And you've heard me talk a lot about that today. You know, the fact that we should be people focused and not numbers focused. But that doesn't mean that we can't enlist metrics to keep us on track toward our purpose. So in addition to the other activities I've mentioned here, I would say conduct frequent check-ins that can give you that qualitative data as well as surveys to give you the quantitative data. This is something that most organizations already do, but usually is done in a silo without everything else that we've talked about here today, and they need to work together. And of critical importance, I would say, is to set those team goals, but do this with the team's buy-in. You know, if you create goals for your team and tell them what to achieve, you won't have the influence and the buy-in that you need to actually motivate them. So have your team collectively create the goals together that you're going to work toward collectively, and make sure that they align with that purpose that you've established. That's going to create that buy-in and motivation. So, whew, we had a lot that we got through today. Again, just scratching the surface, believe it or not. A packed conversation around cultivating purpose, and that's because cultivating purpose takes time. It's a whole conversation that we could talk about forever, but it's so important. I would say having a clear purpose helps you cut through the chaos and really decide where to focus your energy. You can strengthen your ability to resolve conflict and issues. And when you have that purpose established, magic can happen. Cultivating purpose through your behaviors, through your culture, and creating that accountability can have a profound impact on your bottom line. You'll have behaviors that can create trust, transparency, empathy, all these things we've talked about today. You'll create cultures that are connected and purpose driven, and you'll have mechanisms in place to keep you on track toward all of that. So I would say as you take steps in your growth as a leader, pause and start with your own purpose. Rebuild your abs. Do the work there, and you'll see the ripple effect as you develop purpose within your organizations, across your teams. And that's a wrap for today. What?
Fantastic. Thank you to our wonderful speaker, Ciara Ungar. Let's hear it for her, and let's hear it for our audience who chimed right in and gave feedback.
Yeah.
And is really looking to hopefully engage with you in a question and answer period here. I'm going to kick something off until we get something in the chat for you, Ciara. So, you know, out of all of the various things that you spoke about tonight,
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe our audience would be interested. Can you share with us a time when when you had maybe worked with an organization or a team or a pyramid that were just really, I'll just call it dysfunctional, right? And you were really able to come in and help guide them or give them resources to help move them more towards that alignment with purpose and move them into functional high performance.
Absolutely. I love that question, Rhonda. First of all, there's so many great examples of purpose-driven cultures and companies out there that really walk the talk when it comes to this. And I am constantly studying them. And it's always changing within the landscape. And I think that's the beauty of creating purpose-driven cultures. When I work with companies, I try to establish that foundation. Like, this is a growing exercise. It's not like next week we're going to have all the answers. One of the most impactful situations I've been in, and organizations I've worked with through this, there's a company that actually in their mission statement, they propose that they are a purpose-driven company, that they're an empathy-based company. It's been in their mission statement for years, and it's part of their value proposition in working with their customers. And on the inside, totally fell flat. They had a really high turnover. Um, and on the surface, they had monthly team meetings. They said all the right things. They would give monthly care packages to their employees that had like free headphones and snacks and all the things, which sound amazing, right? But they had really high turnover. And the reason is because everything they were saying was totally disconnected from the day-to-day experience. People were so burnt out, they didn't feel like they could actually trust the people they were working with. And so when push come to shove, the actual culture and the behavior of people didn't live up to this supposed mission. And so I think that that's relatable in so many cases, is like we want the employee compensation packages. We give them care packages. Why aren't they happy working here? We can't solve for it. And it's because, frankly, people don't care about that. That is surface level. That's like buying love, right? If we think about love languages, I'm sure you all have heard of that. People want to feel loved in different ways. They want to feel appreciated in different ways just as much. And so just buying people gifts doesn't matter, because that doesn't actually touch people's hearts. And so in working with them, really had to go through several exercises to unpack the root of all of that and discover where the root of the issue was. And honestly, it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of setting your ego aside as a C-suite executive, because you're going to hear a lot of things that you don't want to hear. It's going to hurt, but you need to be open to it. If you want your business to succeed, you need to be open to that. And they were. And so, from there, we put in mechanisms, and it was all about rebuilding the culture, rebuilding behaviors, and really instituting these types of frameworks where you run every engagement, every interaction through, a 3 or 4 step framework that is built specific for your organization based on your values. And that started to keep people accountable in micro situations, holding people accountable. If they didn't uphold those values, they got to go. If you're creating a toxic environment, they have to go, no matter the type high performer they are, right? So I would say with leaders, keeping yourself accountable to that process. But yeah, that was my experience in working with them, and it really changed their trajectory tenfold. Their churn rate went down, their employee retention went up. They had better reviews after that. After working there, people were happier, staying longer. So definitely a really great example.
I love it. Really focusing on that, walking the talk and helping them do that on a consistent basis. But I really loved how you helped them turn that corner through that transparent feedback mechanisms, right? And the really moving from a place of ego and perhaps arrogance or even dismissal, right, to a place of perhaps appreciation and really being able to embody that. So phenomenal job, Ciara. We are down to our last minute of our session, Ciara, and I do not see any questions. Is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to offer our attendees as they really take your thought leadership and seek to move it into action into their organizations going forward?
100%. When in doubt, always think about the abs. I had a speaker mentor one time that told me that was never going to catch on, and it's actually my most in-demand talk. But always think about the abs. You can take courses, you can attend these workshops to build your skills, sharpen those. None of it is going to matter. You're going to continue to feel that disconnect and that rub if you don't do the inner work. So I'm a proponent of that. Always start there.
I love it. Thank you so much, Ciara Ungar. Just big round of applause for our phenomenal speaker tonight. Hopefully really helping you shift forward in all areas of your life. And I so hope that you'll take our challenge up from our phenomenal speaker tonight. I would like to just invite you to our last webinar event on 12/1, Hitting the I Spot, Innovation Through the Lens of Aikigi, with our phenomenal speaker, Mr. Dan Z, and then welcoming in our 2023 with How a We Culture Can Drive Innovation with Miss Luciana Paulis. If you are not an ASQ member, you can join us at www.asq.org. We also have opportunities for organizational members in our partner nonprofit ASQE. We have research if you'd like to look at how quality and innovation are being leveraged and the research that's going on around the globe through our ASQE Insights on Excellence. And you can collaborate and connect with us at our My ASQ Innovation TC group. Again, thank you for your attendance tonight, your engagement. Thank you again to our wonderful speaker. We wish you a happy Veterans Day, long weekend, and wish all of you happy holidays and a phenomenal rest of your 2022. And we hope you'll see you again on the 1st of December with Mr. Dan Z. Good night, everybody. ASQ Innovation TC out for this evening. And thanks again to Ciara Ungar, our phenomenal keynote speaker tonight. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.